The second book of Maccabees. All right, so this second book, it goes over the same story of First Maccabees. All right, you're dealing with a lot of the same characters. However, it is a lot more detailed and a lot more colorful than the first book of Maccabees. Okay, whereas the first book of Maccabees looks to give you like the whole history of the rebellion. What Second Maccabees does is it zeroes in on particular stories that happen right along that timeline, and is a really good way of like illustrating it with more further details what happened at particular events that we read about in First Maccabees. Also, Second Maccabees is a very, very similar text to both Third and Fourth Maccabees. Again, they're not part of the Roman canon, but those books do exist. You can go out there and read them. But for all intents and purposes, if you read Second Maccabees, you get the main gist of Third and Fourth Maccabees as well. So let's begin at chapter 2. All right, we already seen the background that the Greeks have taken over Israel and Jerusalem, and they're Jews they're trying to make conform to Greek culture. So in chapter 2, we get some details about the time of the kings. Okay, that was not mentioned in the book of Kings. Jump to chapter 2. One finds in the records that Jeremiah, the prophet, all right, remember Jeremiah was prophesying in Jerusalem prior to the Babylonian captivity. Right, he was the one telling everyone that the Babylonians were going to come, that people were going to be killed and enslaved and taken away. All right, and we also know that the Babylonians, they took away the sacred vessels from the temple. Okay, but they didn't take the ark. So chapter 2 here is where we get the explanation of why the Babylonians didn't take the ark. So Jeremiah ordered those who were being deported to take some of the fire as had been told. That the prophet, after giving them the law, instructed those who were being deported not to forget the commandments of the Lord, nor to be led astray in their thoughts upon seeing the gold and silver statues and their adornment. And with other similar words, he exhorted them that the law should not depart from their hearts. It was also in the writing that the prophet, having received an oracle, ordered that the tent and the ark should follow with him, and that he went out to the mountain where Moses had gone up and had seen the inheritance of God. And Jeremiah came and found a cave, and he brought there the tent and the ark and the altar of incense, and he sealed up the entrance. Some of those who followed him came up to mark the way, but could not find it. When Jeremiah learned of it, he rebuked them and declared, "The place shall be unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. And then the Lord will disclose these things, and the glory of the Lord and the cloud will appear, as they were shown in the case of Moses, and as Solomon asked that the place should be specially consecrated." Okay, so Jeremiah, with foresight, hid the ark. Okay, so when it suffered sacrilege at the hands of the Babylonians. And he went up where Moses had gone up, right? This is before the Israelites crossed the Jordan River. Think back to the book of Joshua, right? In the book of Joshua, the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, and the first city they encounter is Jericho. Okay, before they crossed the Jordan River, Moses first died, okay, when Moses went up to a mountain and God showed him the promised land, okay? And you can go there today, all right, you see a good chunk of if you go up this mountain, all right, that's on the other border of Israel, you can see a whole bunch of the land, okay? So that's where Jeremiah took the ark, okay, crossing the Jordan, going up to this mountain, found a cave, and then sealed up the cave so it'd be hidden. And Jeremiah said, the ark will be known All right, when the glory of the Lord is revealed, when God brings his people back together. Well, when is God going to bring his people back together and show mercy? Well, when the Babylonian exile is going to be over, when it ends. When does the Babylonian exile end? Well, after 70 years. But then really, it's not completely finished until those 490 years of Daniel are up, okay? And that's when God brings his people together and shows his mercy, right? And that's when the glory cloud returns, right? How's the glory cloud return? Well, instead of overshadowing the tabernacle or overshadowing the temple, the glory cloud, all right, God, the Almighty, overshadows the Virgin Mary, right? You get that at the Annunciation, okay? The power of the Most High will overshadow you. All right, so Mary, right, is that fulfillment of the Ark of the Covenant, right? The Ark being a typology for Mary, right? The vessel that holds the Word of God, okay? All right, and Mary being that vessel as well, at the moment of the incarnation. All right, jumping ahead to go ahead and jump to chapter 6, verse 18. Chapter 6, verse 18. In chapter 6, verse 18, we get more details on the types of persecutions that the Greeks were inflicting upon the Jews. And one of the most well-known stories of these is the martyrdom of Eleazar. So Eleazar was an elder, and he had friends who had already committed apostasy. They had eaten, unclean swine flesh that had been offered to pagan idols. And they were trying to convince Eleazar to, just eat the meat, okay? And then, in your heart, don't really give it, be faithful to God. All right, Eleazar says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to defile myself, okay? I fear God. I don't fear these Greeks, right? The fear of the Lord's the first stage of wisdom. So his friends say, well, look, okay, I'm pretty close with the Greeks. How about this? I'll give you cow meat that hasn't been sacrificed, okay? Cow's a clean animal. And, pretend to eat the swine and then really just eat the cow flesh, and then you won't be defiling yourself, Eleazar, and therefore, we can help you be saved. And Eleazar says, no, I'm not going to do that. Because if I was to do that, I would be causing scandal. All right. I'd be leading others into sin. All right. And I would rather die than do that. So Eleazar refuses to eat any meat. And for that, he is executed. Showing that, who is it? One of the saints. I forget which saint, but the saint, his mom always told him, I'd rather see you dead in my arms than have you commit a mortal sin, right? And you get that same attitude from Eleazar, okay? Like he'd rather die than even pretend to sin, right? Why? Because the sin of scandal is so great. Jesus says, it's better if you get a millstone, right? A huge, nice rock tied around your neck and that you're thrown into the sea than to lead someone into sin. Okay, so here you get Eleazar clearly recognizing the importance of that and choosing death over scandal. Then in chapter 7, we get another very well-known story from the Maccabees, is the martyrdom of the 7 brothers, okay, as well as their mother. So this mom has 7 sons, and they're brought to the king, the governor, to eat meat that's been offered to idols. And one by one, each son is executed in front of the mother for refusing to eat the meat that's offered to idols until they come to her last son, okay? And then the king takes her youngest son, who's like, geez, definitely, I don't think he was like older than 12. Right? Might have been a little bit younger too. And promises him, like, look, little kid, if you eat this meat, okay, I'm going to set you up as a prince among the people. Okay. I will give you huge house. Okay. And you and your mother will be cared for forever if you just eat this meat. And so the boy goes to his mom and he's like, Mom, I don't want to do that. And she encourages him, like, yeah, son, I'd rather, see you dead in my arms than commit a mortal sin. Okay, and so the boy goes back to the king and he gives the king this long speech about how he does not fear him. All right, he fears Yahweh. All right, and he has his faith in the Lord. All right, or in heaven, as they'd be saying at this point in time. And so the king puts the youngest to a miserable death in front of the mother, and then after which the mother is executed, and you have this whole family that is executed. All right, either the 7 brothers or Eleazar, one of them will be the thumbnail for this video, so you can get some artistic reference for this event. All right, and then in chapter 8, the revolt of the Maccabees begins, which we already read about in 1st Maccabees. Chapter 10, we get more details on the purification of the temple. And then in chapter 12, Maccabees is another famous story from 2nd Maccabees. All right, the prayers for those killed in battle. So go to chapter 12, verse 38. Chapter 12, verse 38. Then Judas assembled his army and went to the city of Adullam. As the 7th day was coming on, they purified themselves according to the custom, and they kept the Sabbath there. On the next day, as by that time it had become necessary, Judas and his men went to take up the bodies of the fallen, and to bring them back to lie with their kinsmen in the sepulchres of their fathers. All right, so a battle had been fought. They went and purified themselves, and now they're going back to recover the dead. Verse 40. Then, under the tunic of every one of the dead, they found sacred tokens of the idols of Jamnia, which the law forbids the Jews to wear. And it became clear to all that this was why these men had fallen. So they all blessed the ways of the Lord, the righteous judge, who reveals the things that are hidden. All right, so all the casualties that the Jews suffered in this battle were the Jews who were secretly apostates, right? They're secretly pagans. They probably don't want the Greek political influence around, or they definitely don't like the restrictions on the religion and the faith of their fathers. But they have a couple of their own side gods, all right, or maybe like their own little lucky charms that they put their faith in. Okay, and the men who have these lucky charms, these idols that they wear around their neck, okay, hidden, those were the ones who died. Okay, so these men died in sin. All right, and so Judas is concerned for his men because they've died in sin. So, verse 42, they turned to prayer, begging that the sin which had been committed might be wholly blotted out. And the noble Judas exhorted the people to keep themselves free from sin, for they had seen with their own eyes what had happened because of the sin of those who had fallen. He also took up a collection, man by man, to the amount of 2,000 drachmas of silver, and sent it to Jerusalem to provide for a sin offering. In doing this, he acted very well and honorably, taking account of the resurrection. For if he were not expecting that those who had fallen would rise again, it would have been superfluous and foolish to pray for the dead. But if he was looking to the splendid reward that is laid up for those who fall asleep in godliness, it was a holy and pious thought. Therefore, he made atonement for the dead, that they might be delivered from their sin. All right, so this, you could say the original intent of this passage is anti-Sadducee. So we get to Judaism in the first century. There's two branches, you could say, of religious Judaism in the first century. There's the Pharisees, okay, who adhere very strictly to the Torah. And then there are the Sadducees. And the Sadducees, they adhere to the Torah as well. But unlike the Pharisees, they don't really pay that much attention to the prophetic books. All right. They don't pay attention to the historical books. Their main, it's like their scriptures consist of the first 5 books. All right, the Torah and only the Torah. They would not be going out reading Jeremiah or Daniel, for example. And the Sadducees do not believe in the resurrection of the dead. Right? They don't believe that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead. So, what the author of Second Maccabees is writing here, all right, he's pointing out that Judas Maccabeus was no Sadducee, because in the divide, you typically have the Pharisees are the scholars, and then the priests, all right, the Levites tend to be in the Sadducee camp, and Judas Maccabeus was a Levite, right? He was a priest, son of Aaron. And the author's pointing out that, look, the great Judas Maccabeus, this great priest, he was not a Sadducee, because why would he be praying for the dead if he didn't believe that there'd be a resurrection? Okay. In Catholic apologetics, this is usually taken as well as like a proof of purgatory, which is a little bit of a stretch, because you could definitely see that like it's not really what the author is intending to show his audience that, look, Judas Maccabeus believed in the resurrection. He's not saying Judas Maccabeus, is believing in purgatory. Though you could argue the same principle still applies, okay? If someone's dead, why bother praying for them if there is no purgatory, right? They're either going to be in heaven, so they don't need your prayers, or they're in hell, and your prayers can't do anything for them. But if they're in purgatory, well, then it's good to pray for the dead. So just remember, like, if you ever debate someone regarding the existence of purgatory, my professor advised not using this text as a source of debating purgatory, although it's very popular in pop Catholic apologetics to do this. Remember, like, the Catholic Church is not sola scriptura, right? We rely on the scriptures for truth, and we also have the apostolic tradition, the traditions and teachings handed on by the apostles, okay? And purgatory, you can say there's, evidence, it's suggested in the scriptures, all right? You could certainly say that's suggested here in this story, that they're praying for the dead. But, it's something that was more or less necessary when you have baptism. Okay, and they don't really quite have baptism in the Old Testament. Okay, so it would have been an apostolic teaching. When we get to the New Testament, we'll see that Jesus tells his apostles a lot of stuff, and the Gospels don't record the kind of stuff he tells them, right? So it'd be reasonable, purgatory being part of the apostolic tradition, that would have been given directly by Christ to the apostles in those different conversations. Okay, remember 40 days after the resurrection, prior to the ascension, Jesus Christ spends his time with his apostles, training them and teaching them, it says, about the kingdom of heaven. Well, what did he teach them? Well, the text doesn't say. What did he teach them? Well, you have to go ask the apostles what he taught them. All right. And so who'd the apostles teach? Well, the apostles taught the church. Okay. And then what the apostles taught the church was handed on down. That's what we call tradition. This book, the Bible, okay, it's part of that tradition. All right. Why is Second Maccabees in the Bible? Why is Jonah in the Bible? Why is the Gospel of Matthew in the Bible? How did these books all come together? Well, in the early church, what they did was they would celebrate the breaking of the bread, all right, in remembrance of Christ. Okay, at Christ's command, do this in remembrance of me. The early church would gather together at least once a week, and what they would do is they would read the scriptures together. All right, typically something from the Old Testament. They would then listen to the apostles' preaching. Okay, which would be like the gospel. All right, or we can think of it as like the gospel / homily. And then after that, they would break the bread. All right, they would celebrate the Eucharist after this. If we have time at the end of the course, we'll do some early church history and look at writings of the church fathers where they kind of detail the celebration of the Mass in the very early church, okay, like with the apostles and their immediate successors as well. So how did the Bible come together? Well, the Bible was a liturgical book, okay? It was a compilation for convenience of all the scriptures that would be read at the Christian liturgies, at the breaking of the bread. Okay, and that's why these books got put together, is because it's what the churches were reading. Okay, they were reading Jeremiah. There was no, vision out of heaven saying, put Jeremiah in the Bible, put Acts of the Apostles in the Bible. It's something that happened through tradition, okay? The teachings of the apostles, the texts that were read with them, that's been handed on down to us. All right, enough of that huge tangent. Continuing 2 Maccabees. Go to chapter 15, verse 12. Chapter 15, verse 12. What he saw was this: Onias, who had been high priest, a noble and good man, of modest bearing and gentle manner, one who spoke fittingly, and had been trained from childhood in all that belongs to excellence, was praying with outstretched hands for the whole body of the Jews. Then likewise a man appeared, distinguished by his gray hair and dignity, and of marvelous majesty and authority. And Onias spoke, saying, This is a man who loves the brethren and prays much for the people of the holy city, Jeremiah, the prophet of God. Jeremiah stretched out his right hand and gave to Judas a golden sword. And as he gave it, he addressed him thus: Take this holy sword as a gift from God, with which you will strike down your adversaries. So what's going on here? It's describing a vision that took place, and in it, Jeremiah appeared. Well, why do we stop here? Well, in Matthew 16, when Jesus asks his apostles, who do people say that I am? They say, you're John the Baptist, back from the dead. Others say Elijah. Some say you're the prophet Jeremiah. Well, why the heck do they think he's Jeremiah? It's because of 2 Maccabees, okay? Jeremiah, in this vision appeared as the defender of the Jews, okay? And the Jews in the first century, all right, when Christ is there, they're looking for a Messiah to overthrow the Romans. All right, and so some of the suggestions being thrown out is like, he's Jeremiah, okay? And he's going to give a sword to help us overthrow the Roman oppression, just as Jeremiah appeared in the time of the Maccabees, all right, to help overthrow the Greek oppression. All right, and that concludes the Old Testament. So congratulations, we made it this far. Now all we have left is the New Testament, which we will begin with the Gospel of Matthew in the next video.